True Review is back at ya with another top 10 list. So I've talked about the difference between a scary game and a good horror game before, and believe it or not, they aren't actually the same thing. A scary game is one that focuses on making you jump out of your seat, what with jump scares and, well, not much else. But a good horror game needs to take its time in establishing a truly terrifying atmosphere. And atmosphere is the important part here. A scary monster may frighten you, but a game that makes you shake in fear without even doing anything is the hallmarks of a great horror title. So with that in mind, here are the top 10 best games when it comes to horror. The rules for this list are, it must be focused on the horror aspect, rather than how well it makes you jump. Only one game per franchise is allowed on here, and finally, these are my own personal choices, and not according to the general consensus. So with that said, let's dive into some horror. Corpse Party. From what you're looking at on the screen right now, I'd imagine that those of you who haven't played this one will be thinking that it's not going to be that good. Think again. Yes, the scares aren't that effective and the graphics aren't anything special, but this game has one thing that it excels at, and that's its writing. This title is very good at painting the picture and letting the player know what the stakes are. We know from the get-go that the shit has hit the fan, and now we're trapped inside a nightmarish box dimension with no food, water, or escape. And should you die here, then your spirit will be forever forced to experience an unimaginable pain for all eternity. But though we never get to see what this is like, the fear of the unknown is what's driving the tension in the air. We're standing on unfamiliar ground, and quite literally anything could happen at any moment. This game doesn't give us a chance to get used to our surroundings, and the way forward is not an obvious one. It really does well at making the player relate to the characters, as much in the same way as them, we don't have a solid clue of how to escape from here, and even the smallest choices could have dire consequences, driving the hopelessness home. White Day, a Labyrinth named school. Probably the best part of this game is its atmosphere. A locked high school at night can certainly be an eerie setting, not that I would know, but from the moment you set foot in this one, you can instantly tell that something's not right. And as you begin to make progress here, that feeling of uneasiness continues to grow. What's notable about White Day's horror is that it doesn't exactly go looking for you. Instead, an enemy or a ghost will simply be loitering around in a particular place, and you're the one who's tripped over them. Some of the encounters you face are totally bizarre, meaning that it's highly unlikely to figure out what's coming next and when it will happen. And there aren't that many enemies in this game, meaning that when you do finally stumble across one, the panic you feel is even greater. Simply stepping into a classroom after an hour of encountering your last monster, only to find a demon girl with black hair as long as her body is crawling all over the ceiling and right towards you, will make you bolt out of that room faster than you can say Remake, of which there is one now on PC and PS4, I believe. Call of Cthulhu. For anyone who's a fan of Lovecraft's work will jump for joy upon hearing this title's existence, and then immediately scream afterwards. I think that this is one of the best examples of a game that demonstrates that you can be terrifying without the need for jump scares. The first section of this game spends most of its time establishing the situation you are in, as well as the oppressive atmosphere that you'll have to negotiate. And by negotiate, I mean there's nothing you can do to improve things here, and it's only a matter of time before shit gets real. What I thought was great, especially in the first part, is that you're given time to explore Innsmouth and get to know the very people who will be desperately trying to kill you and sacrifice you to their underworld deities in the next few minutes. And if you thought all of that sounded bad, then just wait until you find out that those gods are real. The first half of this game works really well, as it forces you to think quickly on your toes and employ either stealth, or just find a way to get out of there ASAP. While the second half demands that we go up against some sort of alien race that we have no idea how to get around. Like with Corpse Party, this game leaves us in a situation that we have no idea how to deal with at the start, and things only get more complicated from there. Resident Evil, the remake. The first Resident Evil game was a classic, but nowadays, it's a classic for all the wrong reasons. Thankfully, the remake has been able to do it justice, and now we can take it far more seriously. How do you defeat a zombie? You shoot them in the head. But what if that just makes things worse? Well then, I hope you like running. Many people would be happy to go on record and state that the inclusion of guns and weapons in a horror game just dilutes the horror. I think that the first Resident Evil, and by extension the remake, disproves that, so long as it's done right. Your pistol isn't exactly there to put your enemies down, it's just there to keep them at bay for a little while longer. And with new graphical updates, a much better soundtrack and voice acting, all of this does really well to bring this game into the modern era and shows us exactly what the original PlayStation version was supposed to deliver back in the day. It's awesome, go play it. Penumbra, Black Plague. Overkill was a pretty good game, but there was a lot of time dedicated towards exposition, almost the entire thing was set in a mine, and most of the enemies you encountered were dogs. Black Plague looked at this and recognised where they could make improvements. What we got was an experience that was so vast and varied that it almost felt like it was part of an entirely different gaming series. From research labs to underground caverns, to then walking straight into a nightmare world, Black Plague did everything it could in placing the player in an environment that you just can't figure out. And with varied enemies with different AI patterns, the player is forced to react by playing in a certain way, usually either by being very cautious or by legging it. Walking down a hallway and seeing two bright eyes further down in the distance is gonna set off some alarm bells that a pack of wolves are about to be coming our way. Seeing a giant worm means finding something to block its path and keeping us out of harm's way again. And with an uninvited voice in our heads, all of this adds up to an experience where we're constantly questioning what's going on. Frictional games are very good at doing horror right, and Black Plague's constantly changing environments and atmosphere certainly shows this.
Mambo number 5.
Outlast. As mentioned in my Outlast 2 rant, Outlast 1 did something that hasn't really been done before, but worked incredibly well in terms of messing with the player. When encountering an enemy in almost every other horror game, you can bet your ass that that enemy will suddenly charge at you like their life depended on it, and will try to kill you as quickly as possible. Outlast 1 also uses this method, but not all the time. In some cases, you'll turn a corner only to find an enemy just standing there staring at you. In most other games, if you encounter an NPC that doesn't go for the jugular the moment you appear, then we usually take that person as a non-combatant, and thus, not a threat. So what do you do in these situations? You just pass them by without second thought. But not all hostile enemies in Outlast are obvious. Some will watch you for a while, waiting for you to turn your back on them, and only then will they charge in. Or in some cases, they will follow you around, keeping an eye on you the entire time. It leaves the player feeling very threatened by everyone you encounter, because there's just no telling what they're going to do, or how they're going to behave. Fatal Frame 2. By far the best in the series, Fatal Frame 2 was released back in 2003. Set in a haunted medieval Japanese village, the player takes on the role of Mio, one of two sisters, as she searches the village for her sister who has been led in by forces unknown. But very soon, these forces become less unknown, as the angry spirits of the village's former residents begin to appear one after another. Now, I realise that this has been said before by so many, but it still rings true today. The reason why this game is a fantastic horror game is because while the horror does indeed come to you, the game also encourages you to go to them. The only way to defeat each spirit you encounter is by taking pictures of them, and the closer you are to them, the better. This means that the game encourages and rewards the player for getting as terrified as possible. And considering how each ghost moves around, it's more often than not that you'll just be walking through an old house to all of a sudden find a ghost just walk out of the wall in front of you and attack. The possibility of a ghost just appearing out of nowhere is highly likely in this game, meaning that even when absolutely nothing is happening, the player is still getting themselves worked up more and more. Yes, you have a few boo moments, but the majority of encounters involve a ghost suddenly appearing down the far end of a corridor, slowly turning and noticing you, and then slowly approaching you, either proclaiming your death or begging for help in the process. The horror in this game likes to subtly make itself known before slowly creeping up on you. And even when there are no enemies around, the atmosphere keeps your courage suppressed. Amnesia, The Dark Descent. The Dark Descent is often used as a reference point in the argument, horror games are better without weapons, and I can see their points when I look at this game. You have zero means of fighting back, but that also means that the game isn't crawling with enemies. Having too many foes would just water down the experience if I'm honest, see Outlast 2 for that. But by spacing them out just right, the player is inevitably left thinking that damn thought that we've all thought before. It's been a while since I last saw an enemy, so the next one is bound to appear any moment now. This lets the game do whatever the hell it wants to frighten the player, without actually posing a threat. So when a nearby candle suddenly goes out, or a door flies open thanks to a strong gust of wind, we're not around to watch it because we've already bolted for the door. And with the addition of Daniel becoming more and more freaked out as his sanity level decreases, we're finding that this has a knock-on effect. Well, if the lead character is freaking out, then where does that leave me? Cry of Fear. There are many ways of portraying horror in the gaming format. Some use a psychological approach, some just throw it at the player and let them try to deal with it. Cry of Fear, on the other hand, knows how to do horror well. Not only that, but I'm convinced that almost every possible way of portraying horror can be found in this game. Given that we're experiencing the inner workings of the mind of someone who's suffering from mental and emotional issues, means that literally anything could go down at any moment. And it does. Quite often. And almost always when you walk down a long narrow corridor. And sure, you have guns and a flashlight, but considering that enemies can appear and get all up in your face faster than you can aim, leaves us with the realization that we're not exactly equipped to deal with this situation. And knowing that we're experiencing the thoughts of a man struggling to get to grips with his own sanity, leaves us at the mercy of an external force that we have no control over. The screen could go black at any second, monsters could suddenly swarm the room, the scenery could change, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. All you can hope to do is survive, but that's easier said than done. This is by far one of my favourite horror titles of all time, and comes at a high recommendation from me if you haven't tried it already. It's free on Steam as well, so unless you just don't like horror games, then you've got no excuse not to play it. Another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust. Silent Hill 2. I'd imagine that I'd receive tons of hate if I didn't put this game in at number 1, but then again, these people do have a point. Probably the king of psychological horrors, Silent Hill 2 took everything that was right about Silent Hill 1 and perfected it in a surprising way. Easily the best part of Silent Hill 1 was its atmosphere and setting, and with that in mind, Konami, in probably the only good thing they ever did, thanks in advance for the copyright claim by the way, decided that a sequel should focus on that, rather than the plots from the first game. The town itself is so freaky and otherworldly that it demanded that it be explored in greater depth, and that's exactly what Silent Hill 2 did. The otherworld is as oppressive and threatening as you imagine it to be, but the downtime during the day isn't all smiles and sunshine either. The thick fog, forever present, acts as a constant reminder that you're trapped in this town, and even if you have the layout of the town memorised, it's not uncommon to feel lost or disorientated after turning a corner. And with enemies based on the main character's own darkest suppressed emotions, leads us to wonder, and fear, what will appear next from our minds. Despite Silent Hill being a fictional setting, this game uses certain psychological horrors and torments that are dangerously close to real life fears, and that is why Silent Hill 2 comes in at number 1 on this list. And that's all we have time for, but if you're set in a fictional town, then like this video and subscribe to this channel. Don't forget that I'm on Twitter as TrueReview, where you can find out all of the news and updates about which video is next, and I'm also on Patreon if you'd like to support this channel further. So until next time, see ya!
Sometimes I think this life is killing me.